Okay, so first of all is your working frame or your hoop, and you just want to undo the outer ring so that it can spread apart. Separate them, and then I'm just going to use this one to demonstrate. So when you're picking a place to start on your pattern, have a look at the pattern and think about what colour and where you want to start it, and then kind of centre your frame appropriately on the fabric. Like for example, we started here for the first area and we kind of looked at the shape of the pattern and figured out roughly where to start on the fabric. You should have plenty of extra left over for framing on each side of it, so you can pretty much just guess where to start. Now that I've got the smaller hoop underneath it, I'm just going to place the larger loop around it in a way that pulls the fabric really nice and tight, and you can just kind of manually adjust it as needed by pulling it evenly on the edges. But generally when you tighten this, it will pull it a little bit tighter as well. So then I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So now that that's tightened, I've gone ahead and gotten the threads that come with it. So these are Cleo's ones. Basically what you do is, obviously you just match up what colour you're going to use, and you just chop it off with a pair of sharp scissors and get your needle. So the needle that comes with them will be quite thick and quite blunt compared to the one that I'm using here. The reason you don't use a sharp needle is because you just end up ripping the threads when you go in through them. I basically just try to be as gentle as I can when using a sharp one. It just means that the needle goes through the hole a bit smoother. So I'll show you how to thread up the needle. So if you look really closely at the end of the thread, you actually see that it's comprised of about 6 little double strands of twine. So for a stitch you want to actually use only 2 of these. So what you need to do is kind of very gently unravel it and separate 2 of these out, and very gently pull them apart from the rest.
You want to separate the strands into two parts, into 3 parts.
Go on closer. There you go. So I've got 2 off in one hand and 4 in the other.
I don't know why they don't have this done.
You want to do it very carefully. You actually want to hold it up in the air because it will want to twist as it goes. And if you go too fast, you just end up with a knot. So you just want to let it unravel itself. And see there, it's kind of started to twist up on itself, but at the end you can just kind of gently pull it apart. Thread the needle. Okay, so now that you're ready to stitch, it's time to have a close look at the fabric. So as you can see, each stitch is kind of the middle section between 4 holes, and when you're stitching it's very important to make sure that you go through the hole of all of these little intertwining and not in between or like catching any of the middle ones. So you always want to go from the bottom left hand corner to the top right hand corner. You do as many stitches from left to right as you need to do. So for example, if we were starting at this end orange one here, and we would go all the way down here, going from the bottom left to the top right, and then we change and we go in the reverse, so we go from the bottom right to the top left and go all the way back along that line. So now that we're ready to go and we've found our starting point for where we want to put the thread, and now that we've found a starting hole from the back, we just push the needle through and pull the thread all the way through, except for leaving a tail of about 1 centimetre, or what's that, like 1/4 of an inch. Just like so. And then we're going to go to the front side and we're going to finish the first half of that stitch by going to the top right hand corner of it and pulling it through very gently. Just getting my hand under there. But as not to pull the tail all the way through. So now you can see we've got our tail sticking through and our thread coming through the top, and what we want to do is catch this stitch. Now 9 times out of 10 when you're doing your next stitch, if it's just literally the next one over, or if you start to go back along the stitches, you're always just going to go directly below where you've come out. So we'll just put that in there and grab it from the bottom and pull it through, and you see there it catches the tail and locks it in place. And there we go. On the front you've successfully done your first half stitch and you're in the perfect position to start doing your next half stitch. Pull it all the way through, and once again on the back you can see there we've come out above the tail, and we just want to go back in below the tail, just like that, and we pull it all the way back through and catch the tail. So now you've got 2 half stitches. So what I would suggest is, I'm just going to quickly do a third one, is that you pretty much only need to catch a tail about 3 times, and then you've successfully got it locked in place. There we go. So now the excess tail you could chop off. Now you can see I've trimmed up the tail. Now that I've trimmed up the back, we're going to start completing these 3 stitches. I'm just going to do a little group of 3 here. So once again we went in the hole that was directly below the one that we came out on the back, and we're just going to go back across to the top left, and pull that all through, and now we've done a completed stitch. On the back, once again, we're just going to go in the hole that's directly below where we've come out, and we can check on the front that I've come out the right place, which I have, and then we go in and complete that stitch too. Then of course we rinse and repeat one last time, pulling the final stitch. Okay, so the last two things that I'll show you is how to finish off normally, and then also how to save an emergency situation. So this is how we would normally finish off. We've completed our last stitch on the front, and what you want to do is just pick 3 stitches that are nearby. In this case we've only done a group of 3, but in some cases you may have done several rows, and say you've finished on like an individual stitch down here, you might actually want to pick a group of 3 that's up here to finish off into. And basically all you do, slide the needle just under your stitching, but not obviously onto the front side of the fabric. Now this position is going to be a little bit hard because I've got the edge of the frame here, so I'm just going to try push the needle up and over the frame. Sometimes that happens, you get close to the edge of the frame. You can actually put quite a bit of pressure on your stitches, depending on the quality of your thread. So we're just going to push that through, pull our remaining thread, just loosen that up all the way through, and now we can go ahead and snip that off. So now those 3 stitches are permanently there. But let's say something happens, like you get a knot. If you get a knot, there's no point trying to pull it through the canvas over and over and over again, because you'll just end up damaging all of your holes. So sometimes you might have to cut it off, and sometimes you might even have to cut it off really short. Let's just say you've done quite a decent wee row of them and you don't want to obviously lose your entire row. What you can do is just use your needle to go backwards. So as you can see, my last stitch that I would have done would have been to pull this across to the top here, but what I'm instead going to do is just slide up under that previous stitch that I would have done and undo it. And if I still need a bit more length, right, then I could pull up my previous stitch again. Once again, if I needed a bit more length, because even these half stitches are enough to hold a finish if you need it to, so you could just keep pulling them through until you've got enough thread. You might have to lose like 3 or 4 stitches to do it. In this case I'm just going to pull the whole lot out. But once you've got enough thread, you can then come onto the back side and just finish it like a normal set. So quite often as you're working with it, there gets a natural spin in the thread, and you can tell that this is happening because when you bring it closer together, it naturally wants to like bundle together like this. So all you do to fix that is basically just like hang it free, and just let it spin for a moment until it stops by itself. Now when you bring the thread close together, it doesn't want to bundle itself up, and this will mean that you'll get less knots.